Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Lost Decades podcast. That's right, our podcast can drink. As you can see, I made a new cover for our podcast.
Oh,
so enjoy
fancy.
that. And now we're going to jump straight in to some lost details. And I realized I had made a big mistake. I had not mentioned the world famous copper merchant from Nasir. So if you haven't heard of Nasir, as I said, he was a copper merchant during basically the year 1750 BC. So I had meant to mention him once we got there, but I completely forgot. And I have to, this is basically the corrections part of the episode, and I need to correct this big mistake. So he was a member of a guild of traders based in Dilmun, which is in actually the Arabian Peninsula, like the eastern side. And was active during the years of Rimsin, who ruled Larsa. If you remember him, throwback to Rimsin and Larsa. And he got his copper ingots from this place, Magan, which wasn't too far away, but he basically he is the recipient of the oldest known written complaint. So actually, here's where Dilmun is, if you're curious. It's right here, as I said.
Okay.
And then, so he received the oldest written complaint, which was authored by this customer, Nani, which, if you remember our Sumerian gods episode, wasn't that a god, Nani?
It was.
I forget which god it was. Was that maybe the god of water? No, it was the moon. I think the moon god. I don't know.
No, because wasn't that Nana?
Yeah, maybe it was Nana. So the author expressed dissatisfaction with the quality of the ingots that he had received, and he took offense at how his servant was treated, his messenger was treated by Nasir during the transaction. But it seems like his biggest focus was actually he was building the palace of He was building some sort of palace in and so he was distracted by that, and so he paid less attention to his private business relationships. And in addition to copper ingots, Nasir also traded in copper products and occasionally in textiles, and foodstuffs. Or according to historian Michael Rice, anything in which he could see an opportunity for profit.
All right. I'm loving these memes so far too, because
there's so many memes about him. So if you're listening,
I know all the references. So
this meme is a guy standing in the corner and he says, "They don't know that Nasir isn't a Sumerian. He's a Cato-Babylonian." And if you've been listening since episode 1, you'll get that joke.
You'll know what that is.
So, anyway, I have one more. I just want to read this one out loud if you're listening. This is actually getting serious. Stop using anti-Nasir language. Instead of saying your copper was inferior quality, how about I can't differentiate between good and bad copper? Instead of saying you treated my servant with contempt, say, and I treat my servant with respect all the time? Good question. Instead of saying I received an insufficient number of ingots in my last shipment, just say I need to learn how to count. Just admit you're not. This next part's in Sumerian. And then lastly, instead of saying perhaps I should take my business elsewhere, try saying better the devil I know. I don't know any other copper merchants anyway, because he is the best in town. So anyway, that's Nasir. And now we're going to jump into one quick review about Egypt from last week. Hatshepsut, basically the most famous early female pharaoh of Egypt. I felt like we had maybe you had said this, but I wasn't fully clear on the fact that she let Thutmose III rule at the same time as her. He wasn't really ruling, but he did have a lot of power. He had military.
Yeah, I mean, it first started as a co-regency with him and her as both co-regents. Then she became the pharaoh, and he became the one lower. We're like, I can't remember the name, but there's like two versions of
it, or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was the higher version, but she also didn't scorn him because she let him be in charge of the military and like the police and stuff like that. So
And it almost feels like maybe because he could focus on the military factor for like 20 years, that once he became pharaoh, he was really good at fighting. And that's why he is essentially the Napoleon of Egypt.
And not only that, like Napoleon of Egypt, all I think it probably helped make the military respect him more because he spent more time with them as opposed to just chilling in the palace all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, so also it's not like the second she died, he immediately was like, "Oh, I hate her," and started destroying all her, statues and temples and everything. It was more, I think you did mention this, but it really was more that right before his heir was going to take over, he started doing it probably just to not confuse the who was going to become pharaoh next,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So doesn't seem like he was bitter about her ruling during that time. He just wanted his son to have more legitimacy and be like, all right, my son's going to be the next king, not like her son or whatever. So anyway, let's jump into a little bit of review because Thutmose III, technically the end of his reign is going into this episode. And I think
Hmm.
we had said we were doing 1450 to 14 like 20, but we're actually going to go all the way to 1400, just so you guys know, because it
There
is a
wasn't as
little.
much going on during that time as we thought, so we kind of had to push it forward.
Yeah, like weirdly, it's almost like Egypt's kind of the only huge thing if we had just stuck to the original timeline. But now we'll be good. We have quite a bit is going to happen. So, just to kind of summarize Thutmose III, his end of his reign, he kept up his aggressive campaign through Levant and Syria. And after the Battle of Megiddo, he subjugated Kadesh and basically all of Syria and into the Mitanni lands. And then basically when he was focusing on the Mitanni, which, if you'll recall, are a Hurrian people that have an Indo-Aryan ruling class. They're kind of a weird group of people. Basically, in 1446, he crossed the Euphrates River, and the way he did this, he sailed to Byblos, and he just took boats with him, and it made it look like he was just going to do a normal like tour of Syria and just kind of be like, "Hey, I'm still in control here." But then he did his usual raiding and pillaging as he moved north, but then when he passed through, like they were still unconquered, but he was passing near Aleppo. He quickly just crossed the Euphrates, and then he took the Mitanni king completely by surprise.
I
And I
mean,
think
yeah, he couldn't even raise an army at the time. That's what I heard. So he basically was able to just stomp around and do whatever he wanted.
he only had like some boats that could kind of defend, but yeah, he literally had no army at all. So they just completely attacked Mitanni. He pillaged a bunch of places. Apparently, the nobles hid in caves, according to the Egyptians. He got a bunch of people to add to his harem, and he got hundreds of soldiers. He put up a stele right next to the one his grandfather Thutmose the First had placed, decades
After
earlier.
crossing the Euphrates, yeah.
He was the first one to cross the Euphrates. And all this stuff gets carved into the annals of Thutmose III at Karnak. Later on, the king of Mitanni raises a large army and they attack the Egyptians around Aleppo. Um, so Thutmose boasts a total victory, but um, there's not really much plunder. So they kind of think maybe it was more of a draw. He only got 10 prisoners of war. And but he did start receiving tribute from the Hittites after this campaign. So it does seem like something
Well,
good came out of it.
and after all his campaigns, didn't he start receiving it from like a ton of people? I remember reading that it was like the Greeks and the Cretians and like the Hittites and the Mitanni, and there was just
Yeah,
so many people.
you're right. Yeah, he did. So it does seem like they are all, at least for a while, paying him tribute. And in year 50 of his reign, I guess is what it says, he waged his last military campaign. He attacked Nubia, but only went so far as the Fourth Cataract. And no pharaoh had actually ever penetrated that far with an army. They had
Yeah.
only kind of spread. There was still kind of a spread of Egyptian culture that far, but he uh, he really was. I see why they call him the Napoleon of Egypt. And now we're going to move into the next Egyptian ruler, who I believe was his son,
Yes.
Amenhotep the Second, and his name means Amun is satisfied.
But that was the thing. That's why it was a big deal because remember we were talking about how his first son, the primary son that was going to take over, was Amenemhat the second, I believe, or first, because I think it was the first because they weren't going off of the whole 13th dynasty.
Yes.
But he died before his dad did, and it was a big deal because Amenemhat II was from the second wife. You know what I mean? His mother was like a commoner, I believe,
Yes. I
and
actually have the
so
details if you want me to
wait,
say.
what?
I think her name was Satya. Or no,
I
sorry,
think
that's so
Tortilla,
his
yeah,
brother's mom was Satya. His mom was Mary Tree Hatepsut.
yeah, because his wife was like Tia.
Yeah.
Um, but the whole point was that he even like because I guess he took over at like 18, and he had a wife that bore him like 10 sons supposedly, and many more daughters. But they talk about how he never picked essentially a grand wife, like a head wife, the supreme wife, whatever it's called, the great royal wife. And they think one of the reasons was because he also continued the whole defacing Hatshepsut statues
Yeah.
and
He
inscriptions
seemed
and
more
stuff.
into it.
But it kind of tracks because it seems like since his mother was a commoner and was the second wife, he was worried that his wife, who they believe was of more noble status, was going to outshine him and potentially take over. And there's no
Yeah.
evidence that that was going to happen, but it seemed like he was worried about something similar happening, so he never wanted to give her any recognition. And so his children and his daughters and everyone was kind of kept out of the spotlight, and it was all put on him all the time. He wouldn't really give them anything.
Yeah. So yeah,
Uh,
some other things about Amenhotep the second
mhm.
is that he was actually born in Memphis.
I thought that was interesting.
Thebes.
Instead of, but it tracks with the commoner wife instead of Thebes. Also, that used to be the old capital. Remember when we were talking about the 12th and 13th dynasty? That was the old capital.
Right. So it's kind of cool. I feel like he would have a good balance of both Upper and Lower Egypt because he was born in the north, but still the center of power is in the south. So he understands both worlds. Because I'm reading more of these books about Egypt, and I feel like we maybe didn't emphasize enough that it's especially in the excuse me, prehistorical period. The two were pretty different. Upper and Lower Egypt were like really separate. So anyway, speaking of books, I did when I was in Portland, I got a new book. So I'd already
Ooh, book
had
recommendation time.
1177
Ooh.
about the Bronze Age collapse. So we're gonna get there. So I've read that before, but while I was there, I saw after 1177 BC by the same guy. So I'm excited because I really don't know anything about right after the Bronze Age collapse. It always is just like, and then we don't really know what was going on. So I'll look into it. I'll see. We have a couple hundred years before we get there.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna have
So I was gonna say
yeah.
back to Amenhotep II. It was an interesting thing because we've talked about this before, but he was able to capitalize on it. The fact that his father expanded the realm so much, he didn't really need to do much to expand it. His whole thing was maintaining control and making sure that everything that they got was stabilized and secure and wasn't going to break away. And
Right.
he the first thing that happened was there was revolt in a place called Toxi that broke out right when he became king, and he was so intense about putting it down. They talked about like that the rebel leaders, he took like 7 of them, I think, and he
Mm,
hung their corpses from his ship. Then he went to
Nubia.
Nubia. Well, that was after. He first went to the temples and hung them up
Right.
in all the temples, and supposedly deported 90,000 prisoners of war, but they said that they think that's exaggerated because there's no way to confirm that. Um,
Yeah.
but he was trying to make it clear that I'm not giving up this territory. And they said it wasn't just trying to make it clear to the people in Egypt, since Egypt had become such a global power. He was trying to make it clear to the Mitanni and the Hittites and the people on Crete that Egypt wasn't giving up anything. Like this was Egypt was a major player, and that we will deal with anyone who tries to come at us. And
He does
yeah,
seem like even though he was less of like a war hero, like compared to his dad, he still did a lot, but he did less. He still was very athletic apparently, and obviously it's going to be a bit of propaganda, but he claims that he was able to shoot an arrow through a copper target 1 palm thick, and that he was able to row his ship faster and farther than 200 members of the Navy could row theirs. That one seems
Wait, I don't know. Are you sure that's
that,
exaggerated?
I think that's actually real.
Yeah, that
And
makes sense.
one other thing was, I think right before that battle you mentioned, he like right away got attacked by some people from Quatna, like the Quatna army.
Yeah.
But he was victorious and he got some loot from that, and he even got a Mitanni charioteer.
Ooh.
And yeah, it does seem like he was really trying to just kind of keep it stable, but you know, Egypt's at kind of their peak performance right now. They have a lot of territory, as you can see, going up.
Well, and it seemed to have worked because the next thing I was going to get into was how the Mitanni wanted a peace deal with Egypt. They
Right,
wanted
actually.
essentially an alliance.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Well, because their main thing was they said they needed a formal cessation of hostilities because while they weren't at war, it seems weird to say a peace treaty. And it was kind of almost split in the line between a peace treaty and an alliance because they weren't in a formal alliance of if we get attacked, you defend us. But it was sort of a, we are going to not unite, but we accept your sovereignty of these regions and you accept our sovereignty of these regions and we can
Right.
commit that to a treaty, and this is just how it is, so that even if the Hittites invade or something like that, the Mitanni, that Egypt is there to almost as a buffer. They're not really a buffer because the Hittites still border Mitanni, but the Mitanni will never go into Egypt and never do anything like that. So it kind of puts a damper on that. And they even pushed for, I mean, we're getting it more into a successor, but they pushed for a marital alliance.
It really
Um,
does feel like the like peak like Bronze Age kingdoms are really coming into their shapes. Like
mhm.
they're solidifying their borders and doing more like international, yeah, like peace treaties and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then he went down into Nubia, but the thing was, he didn't really need to pacify Nubia that much because it basically already was. They said there was pretty much no resistance in Nubia at all, and there was no desire to really go past the Fourth Cataract because there wasn't much to gain, and Nubia wasn't rebelling or fighting or anything, so they sort of just let Nubia be what it was, and then they maintained control of what they had. Obviously, tons of gold, tons of silver, and stuff coming from those regions.
When you were talking about the peace treaty, I forgot that I read kind of for the Mitanni, a lot of their focus was on how the Hittites were getting stronger and stronger, which we're
Hmm.
going to see in a moment, and the Assyrians, which we're also going to see in a later moment. So they're like, okay, Egypt, like whatever, like you do your thing. I don't really care that much. We need to focus on this other stuff. And then for Egypt, you know, it's kind of they're pretty new to the game of kind of being. It's almost like a colony, but in term they're not that used to expanding into that territory. So they're happy that they have access to the Mediterranean. So they're like, whatever we can do to keep this, you know, coastline, we'll do it.
Yeah.
And the one other thing about, you know, I mentioned he was like really athletic, but he also, I don't know, this is just my opinion, but based on everything I read, and I have a direct quote here, he would have been canceled in 2026 because he seems pretty, I guess, like maybe the best way to put it is like nationalistic or like racist, because let me read this quote. So, um, this is copy of the order which His Majesty wrote himself with his own hand to the Viceroy Usur Satet. His Majesty was in the royal residence. He spent a holiday sitting and drinking. Look, this order of the king is brought to you, who are in faraway Nubia, a hero who brought booty from all foreign countries, a charioteer. You are master of a wife. So this is the part where it'll make sense. You are a master of a wife from Babylon, and a maidservant from Byblos, a young girl from Alalak, and an old woman from Arapkaha. Now these people from Syria are worthless. What are they good for? Another message for the viceroy. Do not trust the Nubians, but beware of their people and their witchcraft. Take this servant of a commoner, for example, whom you made an official, although he is not an official whom you should have suggested to his majesty. Or did you want to allude to the proverb, if you lack a gold battle axe inlaid with bronze, a heavy club of acacia wood will do. So do not listen to their words and do not heed their messages. So he kind of just didn't like anyone that wasn't Egyptian.
Which, to be fair, tracks with their whole, after the whole 15th dynasty, I believe it was wow, now I can't remember what they're called, but the foreign invaders who took over Egypt.
Hyksos.
Hyksos, there you go, yeah.
Yeah, I think that maybe has had rippled down, and now they didn't really know about other people that much before. So now they're getting to know, they're going into the lands and they're finding all this new stuff, probably new food, new languages, all this stuff that is like weird to them. So yeah, he doesn't like it. All
No.
right. Speaking of other people that would be weird to Egyptians, do we want to talk about the Hittites and
Yes, but
Tudhaliya?
right before we go, because it'll come up later, I thought it was funny. It's a small thing. Amenhotep the second was very interested in the Sphinx, and he saw it as a representation of the sun god Ra. And they said, and it's something we'll talk about later in future episodes, but they said because of that, he built a whole temple, not a big one, a small temple, in front of the Sphinx, talking about how he believed, even though most scholars believe it was built, by the fourth dynasty after one of their emperors to look like him, that they saw as the manifestation of the sun god Ra, but it led to the slow transition, religious transition to a more sun god centric
Hmm.
religion. Now, I don't want to go too into it because it'll be more important several episodes from now, but I thought it was interesting that
Good
they
to
said
know.
they think he unintentionally, he wasn't trying to do this on purpose, kind of was setting into motion that. So,
I think we've done that a couple times, and it's I think it's usually worth it because I know like 5 episodes ago I remember mentioning Kizuwatna and it was kind of random, but now they come up enough that it's like okay, that was a pretty big battleground for a lot of
yeah.
you guys. So yeah, last week I went back and listened to the episode, and we did mention the Hittite king, the great king Tudhaliya. So a lot of the
Yes.
kings before that are essentially have like no Wikipedia pages. We don't know really anything about them, not even the years they reigned. But for Tudhaliya, we also don't know everything because it's quite confusing. But we kind of mentioned him, but
It
basically
was very confusing. Yeah,
it
because
not to go too much into the details, but yeah, it's just it's even unclear whether Tudhaliya the first and Tudhaliya the second are different people or the same people. A lot of people
which
think they're
gets
the same.
into supposedly there's Hatu Silly the second between them, but some people think that he's not even real at all and is just a representation of the first Hatu Silly, and that people think he's real, but he was actually they
I
were just
know.
referring to the old one.
But there is some cool stuff that I was able to pull out of this general time period. But essentially, listeners, this is the big reason why we're doing 1450 to 1400 is just to kind of keep this all in one episode.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're trying our best to make sure we're being as accurate as possible, but in the just to make things entertaining and easy to understand, we might simplify some stuff. But basically, Tudhaliya the First came onto the throne after his predecessor Muwatalli the First in probably around 1465, and he pardoned and purified. It's called the regicides, is what they're called. The people that killed the king, and they were the brothers Himuwili and Kantuzili, Himilili and Kantuzili. And the former king Muwatalli's commander of the guard, Muwa, may have murdered a queen in retribution for this, and then attempted to stage a revolution with the help of Hurrians. But Tudhaliya and his general Kantuzili defeated Muwa and his forces. And after securing this eastern flank, he decided to kind of assert himself in the south. And he also made a treaty with Kizuwatna that kind of encouraged them. It wasn't super strong, but it encouraged them to help out the Hittites against his enemies, or they could stay neutral if they wanted. So it wasn't a really strong thing, but there's some connection. And but his main focus seems to be just trying to have unimpeded access into Syria. And he apparently ended this Kurustama treaty with Egypt with Thutmose III. So he ended some sort of treaty with them. Um, and he ended unequal treaties with the rulers of these random places that don't matter and probably won't come up again. But they're in kind of like the Syria area. Alala, Emar, Nuhasa, I don't know, Tunip.
Yeah. Remember them for the quiz at the end of the episode.
Yeah,
So
there
they're
will be a
very
quiz. This is the first episode with a quiz.
yeah.
And basically a lot of this stuff we know because of later things. So like in this case, a later treaty from the Hittite king Mursili II, with someone in Aleppo talks about Tudhaliya having a treaty with Aleppo. So he probably had a treaty with them. And I guess eventually Aleppo is going to abandon this alliance in favor of the Mitanni, and then Tudhaliya is going to defeat Aleppo and the Mitannian allies, and
And
destroy
again, these are
Aleppo.
the things that are attributed to the second
The
one,
second.
supposedly.
So
Which is
actually,
why
yes,
last episode I remember mentioning how I was like, I'm confused how he took this territory, but there was also in the last episode for the Mitanni, there was the Sharsh Tatar guy. And I was like, I don't understand how he supposedly took northern Syria, but then and that was after Tahalia, but then Tahalia came down and took it from him. So
yeah.
it's more of a. I realized a lot of my research, some of it was splitting them and some of it wasn't. So I was getting some information from Tahalia the second that should have been Tahalia, or they were claiming this Tahalia the first, but should have been Tahalia the second because we kind of decided to just split them up into two guys just to kind of cover
And I feel
everything.
like at
But
the end of the day,
yeah.
for me, it doesn't matter a ton. Like it, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, what were the Hittites up to? We can say
That
for
no,
sure.
and that is true. It's more just that I might have been inaccurate about, who was fighting whom at the
Yeah.
time. Like,
Well, let's get into what was going on with Tudhaliya II, who may actually just be the continuation of the same guy. But basically, whoever it is, um, this part's pretty cool. And it actually, not to keep bringing it up, but it does connect with the Odyssey because the Western Anatolian Confederacy of Arzawa begins to rebel and encroach on the Hittite control. So they are essentially like the near the area where the Trojans would be. And apparently they also think that the possibly the Ahiwa wow, this is hard to say. Ahiyawans, which are also known as the Achaeans or the Mycenaean Greeks, may have assisted in this rebellion. And one piece of evidence for that is they found a sword with a Mycenaean style found in Hattusa that had an inscription that it was taken from an Asuan warrior, and left as an offering to an Hittite storm god.
hmm
So Tudhaliya II marches against Arzawa, including the Siha Riverland, Hapala, Walarima, defeating them, sending captives and military stuff, equipment home.
Well,
Um,
and the key thing too was that the Mitanni were counting on the Azawa shutting down the Hittites, and then the Mitanni could go in. But then when the Hittites basically were like, no, it defeated the Azawa, the Mitanni were like, okay, we're cool, right? Like we're good. Like we're not gonna do anything.
Interesting. Yeah, they're like, oh, you're strong actually, and yeah, apparently, not only were the Arzawans involved, but for sure, Walusia and Tarusia, which are basically Ilion and Troy, were involved with this. So it's pretty cool. I like that from this point of view, we're just seeing them as this weird group of like this weird peasant kind of what's it called? I don't know, like of just a faraway land that you're kind of in control of, but you don't know much about. And it's like, oh yeah, they're literally like the Trojans.
Yeah.
So yeah, they think that some details of this kind of war period might show up in the Iliad, which is pretty cool. And so also all this campaigning brought a lot of captives and goods from these defeated countries into the Hittite core area and kind of like the eastern, like around Hattusa. And this also caused this one prince, for example, Kukuli, to stir up revolt. So it's almost one of those things of like if you bring in too many sort of enemy prisoners into your core region, they might actually like subvert your rule. But he was able to suppress it. And while he was busy over there in the west, the northern parts of his kingdom had come under Casca attacks. Did you see anything about that?
Wait, yeah, because they were not necessarily vassals, but they were under kind of influence of the Hittites, but the Mitanni were the ones who were kind of pressuring them to rebel. as sort of a prelude into the Mitanni
Mm,
getting more involved, but without having to get their hands specifically dirty, which kind of tracks for them.
right. Apparently, it just takes 2 years to defeat them, and then he has like a year off. Um, and then he fights the Mitanni and the Asuans. He defeats them, and some of them sought refuge with their ally Swastatar.
That
Uh,
was the one we talked about last time. Yeah.
okay, so actually, yeah, Swastatar
He was one of the great kings of the
of
Mitanni.
the Mitanni. So some of the
Yeah.
Asuans tried to like have refuge in his place.
Yes.
Um, and apparently, like he wouldn't. He did do that. So the
He
Hittites
would, yeah, he wouldn't extradite them. That's what
he wouldn't
made the,
extradite them. So the Hittites, kind of attacked, but weren't really able to kick them out.
yeah.
Apparently, Kizuwatna is eventually going to get annexed by the Hittites. And towards the end of his reign, him and his associate and successor Arnuwanda II returned to the Western Front in a campaign against Kupanta Kurunta, the king of Arzawa. So a lot of conflict between basically the eastern part of Anatolia and the western part is kind
Yeah,
of
they're kind of vying for dominance because as much as we know the Hittites become big and in the past the Hittites have been big, this was a time period where it was possible that Arzawa and potentially next episode too could become the major players and controllers of Anatolia.
And I wonder if all this conflict with the Hittites is one reason that starts pushing them kind of towards Greece or just connecting them more with Greece. They're like, all right, the Hittites and all this stuff, they're getting pretty strong because they're going to get up against Egypt and Mesopotamia. They're getting all this technology. So I feel like if you're way over in Greece, they're an easier target for you, probably.
Hmm.
That's just my conjecture. But um, I thought this was kind of funny. So there's this, it calls it turbulent behavior of a Western Anatolian prince, Maduwata, who had been saved from Artusia of Achaea, who's basically, he got saved by Atreus of the Achaeans. And Atreus was king of Mycenae. Um, anyway, I think he's, a important
Hmm.
Mycenaean guy, but he gets saved by him. And then basically Tudalia gives him a bunch of land, and but nevertheless he breaks his oaths to keep his lands and intervenes far and wide in western Anatolia, including the Luca lands and even Alasia, which is Cyprus. And he provoked and lost a fight with the king of Arzawa, this prince does, and caused the ambush and death of two Hittite commanders in the Luca lands by betraying their plans to the enemy, and later became an ally of Arzawa.
Yes.
This prince just seems really annoying. He like is stirring up all this trouble, causing your other commanders to get killed, and then he's like betraying you and turning to the other side. Probably because he's getting yelled at all the time for being an idiot. He's like, fine, I'm just gonna join them.
Looks
Uh,
like someone else is hiring.
yeah. So that's actually all I really have for kind of the whole episode.
Well, I just have a little bit, and it's a small thing. It's just more the guy who in the Mitanni follows the Sharosh Tatar. Is his son Art Artatama, and he wasn't that significant. His only really big thing was the first one to start brokering peace with Egypt, and I feel like we might talk about him more next episode because he deals more with Thutmose the Fourth.
Okay.
But he's the one who realized that Egypt was a rising power, and well, not was a rising power. Egypt was too strong. He needed to make peace, and that the Hittites were coming into his back door, and that they were like, okay, we need to be able to focus on the Hittites and put all our pressure that way. So we need to get Egypt off our back.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Cool.
we get more into him next time. But yeah, his big thing was brokering peace with Egypt and eventually a diplomatic marriage with Thutmose the Fourth. And yeah,
And I just wanted to say that from 1353 to 1336, that's going to be a big period. That's the Amarna period where we have a lot of information. I read somewhere, I think in this like Egypt, where it's like the Everyday People in Egypt book, that we have like 1,000 times more tablets from the Amarna period than like anything before it. Like it's just we have so much for whatever reason. And it's partially, I think, because everything's going well. There's like so much trade and just so much information being gathered. So we
Hmm.
essentially have like probably two more episodes until we get there, maybe one, depending on how we go. So just look forward to that. But yeah, I guess the last thing, I feel like I've said this before, but when I was looking into this time period, it really is solidified as the Minoans are fully collapsing, and it's not like this sudden thing where the Mycenaeans suddenly take over, or the Achaeans, or whatever you want to call them. Um, but it's sort of the end of Minoa. And do you have anything about China? All I really had for China, it's the Shang Dynasty, and they were
Hmm.
using bronze, jade, horse-drawn chariots, highly organized armies, and a stratified society of kings, nobles, and commoners. That's what's
Yeah,
so
it's
crazy.
just more that
You just
this
don't
is
know.
it's still more of a mythical period. Like we
Yeah.
definitely know this existed and we know these kings existed, but the things about them are so exaggerated that we're pretty sure a lot of that is made up. Not that they existed, but the
Mm.
things that they did were probably
Right. I feel
greatly
like, yeah,
exaggerated.
especially in China, they really, because we said, I think it was, what was the pharaoh today? Amenhotep II. He said that he took like 100,000 slaves from that one battle, or he said he could like do whatever, shoot the bow and arrow and row fast 200 people. But I feel like China in the early period would be like, I redirected the river, I created 10,000 fields of wheat like by myself.
No,
And
I get what you mean. And so, yeah, the reason it's so mythologized, though, is that a lot of what we think of as modern Chinese writing, granted, it's changed. I'm not saying exactly what modern is, but like the beginning of the modern Chinese, I'm phrasing this poorly, but like the beginning of the writing system that ends up transitioning into their modern writing system,
yeah.
and their not caste system, but their sort of hierarchy and their mandate from heaven and their whole, the emperor is in control of like these different regions and there's these different provinces is kind of all set up in this time period. They expand on
Right.
it and grow from it, but this is like the beginning of it where the Shah dynasty didn't really have any of that.
I
So,
feel like it's kind of like a little bit like their version of like pre-Ur, and now it's kind of
yeah.
like the beginning of Ur, which we didn't really cover on this podcast, but it's like we know some stuff about it, but not very much. But we know it's kind of the real beginning of
And
their.
that everything after this is built on this, which is why it's so important.
Yeah. But I know it's always so like tantalizing for me where I'm just like, we know that they had kings, they were creating bronze, they had jade, they had things going on. We just don't really know. And I'm just like, I wish like, and you never know, like we could find some more bones
Yeah.
and we could find a
Turtle
whole.
shells.
That's what's cool. Yeah, is like I feel like
Yeah.
in the Middle East and everything, we usually end up finding like bronze tablets or stone tablets. I feel like you don't usually find like bones with things written on it. But that's what's crazy about China is you could find just like a trash heap somewhere, and it's like a library of
Yeah.
information. Last thing I wanted to say was just kind of comparing. I like doing this when we kind of wrap up a century. So we had the 1500 BC map, and now going into 1400. We're in the 1400s. I mean, I guess we've been in the 1400s, and now we're going to be in the 1300s. So they're done. But what are you seeing as the biggest difference? All I'm really seeing is
Well,
that,
the Mitanni getting bigger, the Azawa getting bigger, and the Kassite Babylon. They control Sealand now.
yeah, Sealand's gone. And then it's more like, so before Egypt maybe a little bit more solidly had this Western Mediterranean or Eastern Mediterranean, whatever. But now it looks a little more contested at the end where it's kind of like these other, like Mitanni and everything, are kind of competing with them for like the northern stretch of it.
Because it's after this time that it's fully solidified, is right after the 1400s.
People really want Syria. I think I would guess maybe like the southern part is a little more deserty, and I feel like the Syrian like northern part has just more resources and everything, and because it seems like everyone wants that region.
Yeah. And go the
All right,
previous one
last
again.
question I'm gonna ask, and then we'll end it. Is if you could like live, I guess, in any of these civilizations at this time, which one would you pick?
I mean, Egypt by far.
Egypt?
it's more stable, and that's what I mean. Like if we're
Yeah.
talking about, you're not like a king or a noble, you're just like some peasant. Like Egypt by far.
I think I would probably do that if I actually had to live there, but if I was like immortal and I could just see what's going on, I think
Oh, if that was
yeah,
the
all right.
case,
So
then it would
yeah,
be
if I mean that,
Mycenae.
it would be
Yeah,
what?
Mycenae, because I'd want to see this collapse and the expansion of all of their what's it called, their original colonies that are kind of taking over and becoming their own thing, and you're seeing the development of like a fully Greek culture. Well, I
Yeah.
exaggerated a lot, not really a fully Greek culture, but the establishment of their own culture that leads to the Greek culture.
Yeah, and
So
I want to know what the Minoans are up to, and I want to translate linear A, so you can do that. So you're over there doing that. I think I'm gonna choose, if I'm immortal, I'm choosing Kizuwatna, because I like that it's this weird little nook where you're kind of nooked up in the valley, like between the mountains, and you're
and
on the
it's
water.
Mitanni, Hittites, and Egypt are all
You're
kind
getting
of
all, yeah, you're literally getting all three. I mean, they're kind of all fighting over you, but you see a lot of crazy stuff. I feel like
yeah.
it'd be interesting times. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching or listening. Please follow us on Instagram. I just posted a promo video for the podcast where I said like 8 fun facts that we've like talked about on the podcast. So check that out. Leave a comment, leave a review. And next week, I think we kind of said we're gonna do like 1400 to who knows, but
Yeah,
maybe.
1480. We've been changing it on the fly after we do more research and realize that some of the dates we cut off weren't the
So
best.
you'll have to
So
wait till next week to even know what years we'll do. Maybe we'll go all the way to year 0. We'll just
yeah, we'll just do all of
do
it.
everything. Just do it all. All right. You know what? I don't have a clever thing, so get lost.